So it's a question that comes up for me all the time. How do I know when to walk away in a negotiation? Whether it is a job negotiation or a negotiation over the acquisition of a small pharmaceuticals firm, or maybe it's a personal one. Maybe it's a negotiation with your sister over where you're going to spend Thanksgiving next year. The question of how do I know when to walk away or when to say yes is a critically important one. And today, I'm going to give you guidance to know when to walk away, when to keep negotiating, and when to say yes. If you stick to the end, I'm also going to share with you a common psychological trap that gets people saying yes when they ought to say no. Okay, so here is a simple answer to this somewhat complicated question of when to walk. And the answer here is you walk away when your BATNA is better than what's being offered to you at the negotiation table. But let's break that down. Because first, what do we mean by BATNA? So this is a negotiation term that means best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So before I go into any negotiation, whether it's whether I should acquire this pharmaceuticals firm, whether I should buy this car, whether I should say yes to this job, or whether I'm spending Thanksgiving with my sister, I need to think, if I do not reach an agreement, what are the things that I can do that do not require an agreement? Once I make a list of those things, then I identify which of them is the best, meaning which is the thing I'm actually going to do if I do not reach an agreement. And that thing that is my best alternative to a negotiated agreement is my BATNA. And so as a measure of whether I should say yes or walk away to my BATNA, I need to think about, is the thing being offered to me better than my BATNA? Okay, well, how do I determine that? The way I think about that is before I go into that negotiation, I need to think about what are my interests. And when I say interests, right, what am I hoping to get out of this negotiation? And I should think of those interests in a number of ways. First, what are the short-term interests? And then second, what are the long-term interests? And then I want to think about them in a slightly different way, which is what are the tangible interests? So think about a job negotiation. Tangible interests might be fair salary, good benefits, nice vacation, a good retirement plan. But intangible benefits might be things like to feel respected, to feel valued, to feel seen, to feel admired, right? I want to write all these interests out because once I have those interests out, that helps me assess whether the thing being offered in that negotiation is meeting those interests or whether there's an away from the table alternative or BATNA that is better. And so in any negotiation, right, our dream situation is that all of our interests, our short-term ones, our long-term ones, our tangible ones, our intangible ones, all of those interests are met. But realistically, in most negotiations, some of those interests are going to be met better or worse than others. And so the third step is to prioritize. What are the must-haves? What are the like-to-haves? And what's tradable? So I need to prioritize my interests. All of that then helps me assess when I go into that negotiation, whether I should say yes or whether I should walk away. Now, there are two other things you need to be really aware of that sometimes lead people to blow up a deal when they should say yes, or alternately, to say yes to a deal when they should say no. So let me start with the first of these. And that is when you're in a negotiation, you need to be very aware of when negative emotions come in. Emotions like anger and frustration. And here's why. Research has shown that when we are feeling negative emotions toward the other side, we tend to misvalue our interests. And in fact, cognitively, the research has shown that sometimes retaliation becomes one of our short-term interests. And the problem with that is that it can cause you to say no to something when actually, if we are in a more rational state, we ought to say yes. So it's funny because I was thinking of all sorts of kind of complicated negotiation examples. But the one that stuck out in my mind that I'm going to share with you is one that came up a lot for me as a kid. So in my family on Saturday nights, we would typically go out to dinner. And one of my favorite restaurants, which was a restaurant called the Pine Lake Inn, was one I loved to go to because they would have these really, really good mozzarella sticks. My parents sometimes, though, preferred to go to this other restaurant, which was called Peppercorns. And so there would be these times when Saturday afternoon, we would get into this battle. And the battle would really continue. And I'd be like,
I do not want to go to Peppercorns. I want to go to the Pine Lake Inn. And
my parents would be like,
hey, you're lucky we're going out tonight, and Peppercorns is great, and that's where we're going.
and I'd be like,
Well, I don't want to go there.
and then we'd be in the car and we'd be driving. And somehow I would get this like really unproductive stubborn streak, right? The one that made my mom say, you should be a lawyer. And I'd say,
I don't want to go at all. Bring me home.
and they would. And then I'd be sitting at home with the TV dinner thinking, this was a mistake. Because as much as I preferred Pine Lake Inn over Peppercorns, I preferred Peppercorns over the frozen meal at home by myself. So obviously, this is not a high stakes negotiation, but it is an example that I have seen come up over and over in much more high stakes negotiations. That someone's so angry and pissed at the other side that they say no, even though as their advisor, I'm like, I know this stings, but this is better than your BATNA. Okay, so now let me share with you the other problem, which is the problem of when we say yes when we should say no. And it also relates to another piece of psychological research, which has been termed the escalation of commitment problem. So what is the escalation of commitment problem? It's the dynamic that happens when we have been in a protracted negotiation, maybe for hours or weeks or maybe months. Psychologically, we've put a lot of energy and effort into working this deal out. And so we are very committed to closing the deal. Even though analytically, everybody else who's analyzing the problem is saying, oh, hello, friend, your BATNA here is way better than this deal here. You are overpaying for this entity. You've made too many concessions. This is not going to pay off for you. But no. I've been at this. The deal's going to happen. We're going to close it. Right? We have fallen victim to the escalation of commitment problem. And so you always want to be very cautious around this sunk cost issue. One of the ways that we can prevent ourselves from falling into this trap is by using some kind of coach or third-party advisor to prevent us from doing this. Some of you may remember during the Obama administration when the United States entered into the nuclear deal with Iran. And there were some people at that point saying that the United States had fallen victim to an escalation of commitment problem, that we had somehow given up too much because we were so committed to a deal happening. And in fact, in the next administration, President Trump actually abrogated that agreement. Now, as we sit here in 2022, almost all negotiation experts would actually say we did not fall victim to an escalation of commitment problem. That in fact, the deal that was on the table was better than our BATNA, even though it didn't meet all of our interests. But in that moment, people had a different view on it. So, to take a step back, if you're in a negotiation and you're trying to decide, should I say yes to this or should I walk away? Here are the key things you need to know. First, identify what is your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The way you do that is by identifying your short and long-term interests, your tangible and intangible interests. You then prioritize those interests. If the deal being offered you is better than your BATNA, meaning it meets more of your key interests than the thing you would do if you don't reach an agreement, then you say yes. But be careful. You don't want to make negative emotions in a negotiation cause you to say no because you want to retaliate, even though the deal on the table is better. And similarly, you want to avoid the escalation of commitment problem. So, if you want to continue your learning on negotiation, watch this next video, which is how do I negotiate with the other side when it has more power. In addition, I want to give you some really important advice. It is definitely in your interest to say yes to this channel. So I'd be really grateful if you would subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Please like this video and ring the bell so you never miss a new video from me. Okay, your interests are going to be met if you keep watching.